Moving into a new home was the perfect excuse to upgrade everything, including our sheets, and Brooklinen did not disappoint. After long days of unpacking, slipping into these sheets felt like the ultimate reward. The buttery softness, the perfect weight, and the way they just get better with every wash make our space feel even more like home. It's not just an upgrade, it's a whole new level of comfort. We've had our Brooklinen sheets for a little while now, and what I love most is how they get softer and even better with every wash. They're made to be lived in, not just looked at, whether that's cozy weekend mornings with coffee in bed or crashing into them after a long day. The quality is unbeatable, and knowing they'll last for years makes them 100% worth it. Our house feels more like our home with them, and honestly, I can't imagine going back to anything else. As we transition into spring, I love refreshing our space with lighter layers and soft textures to match the season. Swapping out heavier blankets for Brooklinen's airy quilts and adding fresh, crisp pillowcases makes the whole bedroom feel brighter and more inviting. There's truly nothing better than cracking the windows, letting in that first warm breeze, and curling up in the perfect mix of cozy and breathable bedding. Even our dog Sawyer has claimed her spot, refusing to sleep anywhere else. Shop award winners and fan faves in store or online at brooklinen.com. That's BROOKLINEN.com. Get 15% off your first order today. Welcome to Brutally Anna, a podcast about finding love, losing love, and all the things we think about but don't talk about enough. I'm your host, Anna Kai, aka Maybe Both across social media, here to remind you that life can be beautiful even when it's freaking brutal. While I was freaking out about the fate of civilization as we know it in 2020, comedian, writer, and actor Jenny Yang was busy at work being nominated as one of Variety's top 10 comics to watch. She's the epitome of an overachiever, having written for Paramount Plus, Prime Video, and also starred in Netflix's comedy drama series, The Brothers' Son. As one of the loudest champions of Asian American representation in Hollywood, Jenny reminds us all that everything is fine, even when it's really not fine, if we can find the humor in life. Thanks so much for being here.
That's such a nice intro.
I'm so excited to talk to you. I have so many questions, but I think one of the best things you said, which really reminded me, like, it's such a divisive time right now. Mm-hmm. And you said you can get people to think about anything if you make them laugh. And it's so true because you can bring together people from totally opposite sides of the political spectrum, religious spectrum. And if they both laugh about the same thing, that means there's a shared experience there because you don't really laugh unless you've experienced it, right? Or if you feel like it's true.
Exactly.
So, but the thing is, like, you had very much a first career, and then you didn't even start off in stand-up comedy. You started off in like slam poetry or like right. So like, how did you realize you were funny? Because like, in order to make people laugh, you have to think you're funny first, right? So was there a moment, was like one particular joke at a party, somebody was like, you're so funny, you should do stand-up. And I was like, maybe I will.
I think it's an accumulation of things because ever since I was younger, I've had people say, oh, you're so funny, or, you know, you remind me of Margaret Cho or whatever. You know,
which the OG.
Right. And then
because there's nobody else to compare you to. Honestly, the amount of people who are like, you remind me of Lucy Liu. When I first tried to start acting, I was like, we do not look anything like one another. I mean, I wish I looked like, but like, no, we don't.
I feel like figuring out that I was funny is an accumulation of things because when you're a little kid, there's not this like epiphany when you're a little like Asian immigrant girl, like, oh, you should become a comedian. You know, it was more like, I realized very early on that, you know, when our high school service organization had a bake sale in front of the Ralph's grocery store, that I was like not shy in heckling people and cajoling them to like buy cookies. I was very good at that. So I was like, oh, I'm actually really good at somehow selling. And then, and usually you do it by, you know, making people laugh. I was a big student government nerd in high school. I ran for student body president. I won. You win by like telling a speech that makes people laugh. So I don't know, like I just feel like going back, it makes sense when I think about things. But yeah, as I'm growing up, I'm not like, oh, I'm going to become a comedian.
Yeah, because you had a very different path in life at first. Although knowing what you were good at, like student body president, and you kind of did that, you know, in your first career.
Yes. Working in politics, yeah.
Yeah, which is, and you're still such an activist and you're still so outspoken. But, you know, that career probably made more sense to your Asian parents than this career now.
Yes.
Did you wait a while to tell them that that you were pursuing this artistic path. I want to know like when the transition happened. I know you did it to kind of save your sanity. Because you were
Yes.
basically like, I was negotiating for like 85,000 people on a daily basis. And I was going to kill somebody if I continued to do that. So I needed something to still love humanity.
Oh, I love that Anna does her homework. Incredible. Yeah, I just was I started doing stand-up comedy because I was so stressed out from being a manager. I was like,
But stand-up comedy to me sounds so stressful. Like really, that's like most people go like acquire a drinking habit or like, go to yoga. You're like, I'm going to put myself in front of like the toughest crowds ever.
but it's whenever people say, "Wow, why did you think it was cool to do that?" Honestly, working in politics, representing uncles and aunties who are so passionate about their own contracts, these are like public employees. They wanted to throw chairs at us. Honestly, so dealing with a heckler at an open mic is like not less stressful.
Interesting.
If that makes any sense.
No.
I was so stressed out from working in politics that the stress of doing an open mic and bombing was chill.
It was nothing because
Yeah.
you were just kind of used to bombing every day almost as a labor union organizer.
Yeah, just, I was paid well, not underpaid, but I was definitely underappreciated.
Right.
So what I did was I took improv classes, I took stand-up comedy classes, and then I just sort of started going. And, all of my coworkers, they were all alcoholics. And so they were happy to get 2-drink minimums, come to my like bringer shows where you're not good, but they're going to give you stage time because they know you'll bring people.
Well, because they force you to bring people.
Yes. And
Otherwise,
so,
you're paying for those 2 drinks, I think.
100 or something, So yeah, it was chill. Like I was able to just sort of do that while I was still working. And I made myself a little spreadsheet, a little exit strategy. Like what would it look like if I quit and became a consultant? I didn't know I would go into entertainment, but I did imagine quitting.
What do you mean, like, what would it look like if I quit and became a consultant?
Like if I was just freelance.
Oh, on the political side.
Yes.
I was like a consultant to comedians?
No,
Okay.
anything. Because at that point, I was like just getting better at doing stand-up comedy. I wasn't quite ready to have the audacity to like be like, I'm going to quit immediately,
Yeah.
So I did that a couple years before I actually quit. And also, it took me a while to actually say, well, I think I'm going to full force like become an entertainer. There was a hot moment of like less than a year that I was a home and office professional organizer. Like, like Marie Kondo?
Yes.
Before Marie Kondo blew up, I was out here.
There was Jenny Yang.
Yeah, there's Jenny Yang organizing your workflow for your morning routine with your kids,
That's why. So is your house super organized?
It's okay organized.
Okay.
You always want to have that one stash. That everything, that one place where everything could go to.
The junk drawer.
Yeah.
The junk drawer or the junk closet.
I have a junk storage room, but we're going to organize that. I feel like it's in cycles. I do try to it's like cleansing for me. Is that weird?
Yeah, no, it's not.
It's cleansing for me
It's
to like
spring cleaning.
I clean pretty regularly, yeah.
You should make that into a bit. Like bring us along on Instagram or TikTok and be like.
And I'm out here trying to figure out my content this year because I kind of I like took a break really during the pandemic. I was too depressed.
Weren't we all?
I know. I mean, other people soared and coped by being online and like making content, which is great. And you were doing such a good service. Me, I was dealing with hormones. I was dealing with a father passing away. All these things.
Yeah.
So I was like, I can't deal. I can't be online. And so
I cope by going offline. I don't want to be in the public eye when I don't feel good about myself. And that's also why I don't post that much in comparison to other people in my bucket. I post 2 to 3 times to 4 times a week max. I can't be online that much. I'm like, y'all don't need to know.
That's so much to me. That's
I know.
so much to me. And then I think it's like during the pandemic, the TikTokification of social media really happened. And so that was just like, you got to feed the beast.
Right. I know. And it's like how I got to stay in front of people and I got to stay present and I got to be like valid almost.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you have so many buckets that you are a stand-up comic and you're a writer and you're an actor. So it's sort of like, I think it's reasonable for you not to be posting every day because for somebody like me, I don't wear all those hats. Like you're producing content whether or not we see it on Instagram.
Yes, that's true.
Is there one that you like the most?
It's hard to say. I do love writing. I think the foundation of everything I do is writing. But, I used to perform as a poet. I wouldn't call it slam poetry, but that's what I did from college into moving back to LA after college. And that's how I got feedback that I was good at communicating and good at like working with an audience or a crowd. And so, that's always going to be lovely, is like live performance and the immediate kind of gratification, right? Of
That
like getting a
energy.
reaction. Yeah, I love it. I love that stuff. That's why I love hosting. That's why I decided to like write and host my own monthly live comedy show.
So
Self-help me.
you don't get, yeah, go watch, go watch. But you don't get stage fright then. You don't.
Oh, no, I do get stage fright. It comes sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, not usually.
Not usually, because you're more looking forward to the energy than you are afraid of being judged by it.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the context, I've done auditions where I felt very like not safe, right? I've done.
The audition process is because I was a struggling actress
Yes,
for
I've
many
heard. I
years.
saw.
And that the audition room is always so horrifying to me because it's
Yes.
you're acting in a vacuum. There's almost like nothing to feed off of. And
Yeah.
sometimes you get a good reader,
Right.
and they're trying. And sometimes you get a reader that's literally just like meh, 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 meh,
Yeah.
meh, 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 and you're like trying to give them all of this. Yeah, it's a really, really
Yeah.
intimidating process.
But yeah, stage fright. I feel like at some point, I just like took away my shame.
You're like, I
You have
gotta
to
live.
just like unplug from the shame machine and just be like, well, I guess what do you have to lose than your dignity?
And like, fuck dignity, right? Okay, so I relate to your content on so many levels because you speak a lot about Asian American issues and everything. And I grew up outside of Philly, which you have an odd tie to, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah.
But something that you said really resonated with me because you said that when you were in high school, there was some kid named Burton, who was Asian, by the way, who said that your nose was too big and that
yeah.
your nose was too big and you would never be an actor.
Yeah, that name was changed to protect the innocent.
Right, I know. I was like, Burton's oddly specific. I was like,
That's not the
Burton
real
might
name.
fucking sue you if he listens to this. But yes, we'll call him Burton. We'll call him Chad.
Yeah.
For the sake of my.
We love a Chad.
We love a Chad, or we don't love a Chad.
We don't. We like to use the word though.
Yes, we like to use the word. And I have a very similar experience in that when I was a sophomore in high school, I was auditioning for the school play, which was The Lion in Winter, which takes place in like old ass England.
Yeah.
And there were only 6 roles. 2 of them were women, female roles. And I had a kid say to me, we'll call him Chad, he was like, you shouldn't even try out because there are no Asians in this play. And I remember I was like, oh God. And guess what? I got one of the 2 female roles.
Hell yeah.
And I remember thinking at the time that maybe he was right, but I was just going to try anyways. And that's kind of how I've approached my life. But, I did think for a second, maybe I really shouldn't be doing this. I mean, was there any part of you that was like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this? And is there any part of you that still feels kind of that imposter syndrome that everybody talks about these days?
I've decided to let go of the term imposter syndrome just because one of the things that excited me about pursuing entertainment or just doing what I do, which is act, write, create content, and host, all of it, is every day I get to do something new. And that's what excited me, And once you kind of work on that muscle of like being excited to do something new, then nothing should faze you, if that makes any sense. But that does require a lot of delusion. I love delusion. I feel like you have to be committed to this work of being like, I have an imagination, pay me. That requires delusion in both your creative skills as well
creating
as
something out of nothing.
Yeah, as well as your emotional state, Use that imagination, pretend you're fine, I feel like that's like a really good way to move forward, So yeah, I just have been, it comes and goes. Sometimes when I'm not feeling as well, when the hormones hit, like I've done like IVF where the hormones are just off the charts, I will get very blue. Like I will have like a week or 2 of just being like, no one cares. Why do I do what I do? And then I just go into my little hole, I like watch like Harry Potter, like any good millennial. Sorry, don't give money to JK, but
I relate to it, but it's comfort. It's like comfort food for your
we're just
eyeballs.
Yeah, you're just like,
I just want to disappear in this fantasy land.
exactly.
Hogwarts with Dumbledore.
Yeah, so I think I don't use the term imposter syndrome anymore, but I do try to manage my my delusions, my negative self-talk. Honestly, at this point, if anyone has negative self-talk, we should just imagine your voice in our heads because it's so good for talking back to our critical self-talk.
But I use it to talk to myself, and it's so much
Yeah.
harder to take your own advice than it is to
is.
take someone else's advice. Like, I will listen to maybe somebody else talking about similar topics that I'm talking about in my
Yeah.
videos, but I'll listen to them any day over I'll listen to myself, and I struggle a lot with mental health. Like, I have struggled with depression. I still, I went through a really bad phase of depression a couple months ago. And it's so funny because I always thought, do you struggle with like mental, you said you were depressed during the kind of.
Yeah. Technically, it was called. So I used to go to therapy every week, and especially during the time that I was like so burnt out from my first career in politics. And my therapist, she accidentally let me see the report. I accidentally saw it, and it was like
your diagnosis.
Yeah, and
Oh,
it was
God.
like adjustment disorder. So she was like,
Oh.
this is bad enough. You're in a bad enough state that you could take meds, but she believed that this was more of a life phase thing.
Okay.
That I was overly stressed. I was going through a lot of changes, and I was not equipped, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
Which makes so much sense because
Yes, it does.
she ended up recommending me doing group therapy, which was called assertiveness training / anger management. I was like, wow, who knew I needed more assertiveness? But that's what I realized is that sometimes in your public life, you can be very assertive. You could be very like, I know how to handle business. But in your personal life, it could be a totally different personality.
Oh,
That's
100%.
that's why like uber feminists that you see who are super advocates like Gloria Steinem or whoever, could confess that they've been in abusive relationships, right? Because it's very different. Your ability to navigate your emotional world in relation with an intimate partner versus a public world,
Well, because I think in our professional lives,
Yeah.
everybody knows how to compartmentalize that because there's a way to
Yes.
rationalize it. And they know not to bring, especially when people are not in the entertainment industry or the creative, we have to bring a little bit of our or a lot of our personal lives
Yeah.
into our work.
Yes.
But if you're in a corporate job like you were before,
Yes.
you're expected to kind of tune off that side of you.
Yeah.
And so, but your personal life, I think dating is like the place where all of our shit comes out.
Oh my
It's
God.
like the inner child trauma just comes flowing out. And you've got a very unique and diverse background. And so there's a lot of probably shit to unpack there.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, you were born in Taiwan.
I was
right?
born in Taiwan. I came to America when I was 5. I was the youngest of 3 kids, so I learned how to speak English first of the whole family, became like a kid translator the way we do sometimes
Right.
as immigrant kids,
Yeah.
which is a lot of responsibility. And it probably shaped who I am as this like overachiever, needing to make sure everything's taken care of kind of person.
Like very independent person. I'm the same way because
Yeah.
I would back then there was no such thing as like free Amazon returns, no questions asked. Like, do you remember having to return something to like Kmart back in the day?
Oh,
And you would have
Kmart.
to make like I know, right? This is how old we are. If you guys don't know what Kmart is, you're really young. But I remember you'd have to make like a, almost like a deposition to like the customer service rep as to why you needed to return this item.
Yes.
And we had no money. So like if my mom needed to return an item, she really
It's
needed the
important.
$20 back.
Yes.
And I would be standing there watching her try to explain it in her very, very broken English. And I would be like, I can explain this situation so much better and I could make this return happen, but it doesn't look reasonable for a 7-year-old to be negotiating on behalf of her mother.
Imagine trying to translate your mom at a doctor's appointment. When was the last time you had sex? Mama. Yeah.
And
So-
your parents don't speak any English, right?
No, so my dad spoke English,
Okay.
but he knew more sort of like reading English.
Okay.
And then my mom, none at all, pretty much. She
Okay.
was a garment worker, kind of worked factory jobs most of her life. My dad,
He worked in the airlines?
my dad worked for
Yeah.
China Airlines in the security division, kind
Okay.
of working on policies, kind of this middle manager.
So he had to know how to speak some English.
Yeah, and he knew how to write it, but his speaking wasn't as good, like he would easily be like, no, you just talk to the man. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're 7? I don't care.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Talk to the Kmart official. Yeah.
Figure it out.
Totally. Yeah. I forgot
That's
what the question was.
I guess I mostly wanted to just know more about like your upbringing in terms of like how that shaped you and why you decided to go, because I think it's interesting that you decided to become a labor union organizer, and that was like your first career out of college, right?
Yes.
And that's like an odd, like I don't
Who
hear
does
many
that?
kids being like, I want to grow up and negotiate on behalf of labor unions. Like, where
Right.
does that sense of justice come from? And my question is, does that sense of justice come from watching your parents struggle in this country and realizing how unjust this country is?
Yeah. I would say that, my first taste of injustice was being the only girl with 2 older brothers. Let's be honest. All right. My first bullies, your siblings.
Yeah.
And then also, having a dad that was very patriarchal and old school and old fashioned. My dad, is like essentially was the age of a grandparent to me. So he was even farther back in his sort of old school ways. Right. And so, I just was raised with my dad being very kind of like a controlling patriarchal dude, my mom being the sort of stereotypical, she only lives her life for other people. She's a mother, she's a sister, she's a wife, that kind of a thing. And I think very early on, I had this attitude of like, this doesn't seem fair. I think boys get more power. And so even in high school, in middle school, I was like, oh, men's voices that sound lower are considered more serious and authoritative. I should lower my voice. Like I literally made
that's
all
so
of these
interesting that you picked that up in high school.
Yeah, I was
Most
like,
people are just like, I want a boyfriend.
no, I was more like, I think this is unfair that I get to be treated this way. I grew boobs, bigger boobs than most of my friends. I started hunching over because I was like, boobs are weakness. Like, you know what I mean? I didn't use it as like, ooh, this is power. I
Did
can
you go
attract
all
men.
Elizabeth Holmes on your voice and like lower
No,
it?
not that low. But it's basically the way I sound now. It's
Right.
imagine like being 12.
No, I know.
This is low.
Right. You don't, it's low.
I didn't know, like, there was something inside me that didn't allow myself to giggle at boys. Does that make sense? Like,
Yes.
there was just something that just, I couldn't.
You were like, I need to be taken seriously more than I need to be liked by boys.
I would say so.
Which is
the hormones
amazing.
caught up. The hormones caught up. But but that was because of the kind of model I saw in the way that my parents treated each other, and the way that my brothers were treated versus me. Now, I did great in school because I came when I was younger, so my English was better.
Mm-hmm.
So that did give me a little bit more privilege. But
How old were your brothers when you guys came?
they were like 15 and 14. They're
That's
much
tough.
older. It's so hard.
That is tough because after 9, that's when you have a really hard time picking up a new language with no accent.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my older brother has a slight accent. My
Right.
second brother doesn't. In the same conversation with my 2 brothers, I'll speak to my oldest brother in Chinese still and my second brother in English. But
my
my
gosh.
oldest brother, he's fluent,
Yeah.
It's
It's just
just the way it works,
right.
Yeah.
And it's just the timing of your life. That is.
Yeah. So I would say, at first, me wanting to sort of seek a justice-oriented job was because I felt like there were all of these things that felt unfair, even within my own home. And when I met other activisty kids, what I realized is they were always inspired, like me, by if they had a personal issue that they couldn't solve, they decided they would become an activist to solve it in the public, right? So if you can't fix your parents' fucked up relationship, maybe there's a way that you can change a public policy about it. Like that was a lot of the mentality of the other kids that I met who were super into activism or working in politics, If you feel like you don't get enough money because my parents are retirees and they don't get enough money, maybe you go out and be like, oh, I want to like fix Medicaid. I want to fix Medi-Cal, This is the mentality of little young like activisty kids, at least the ones that I met and that I like did programs with,
I mean, it seems like from a very young age, you've always had a very big scope of what life should look like outside of like your immediate world, which is very unique.
Yeah, I just grew up too fast.
You did.
I was just like, I felt responsible for everyone else, you know? And that translates into like an intimate relationship. I was a terrible codependent in my relationships. You know, where they were just like,
Well, because you were trying to
I'm
make
always fixing
somebody up,
things.
make up for
I love being a Captain Save-A-Ho. I love being like a fixer.
Mrs. Fix-It.
You know, right? Because that's what I
Did you date in high school and college?
No, I didn't date until I was 21.
Oh.
I know.
Wow.
Because I was like, ugh, men are bad. Why would I trust them?
You're like, I just want to be one. I want to have the power of a man, but I don't want to date them.
Yeah, that's how I felt.
Okay. So your first boyfriend,
Oh,
who
yeah.
was he? And why did you then decide that men were maybe not quite as bad? Did you
the
finally
hormones caught up. The
at
hormones caught
21
up.
you hit puberty?
I mean, the puberty had happened. It was just, it overcame the sort of desire to not be intimate with a man. Yeah, no, I finally took a risk in like actually being more emotionally present and honest. I went through therapy for the first time in college. That helped me a lot to kind of go through some of the little trauma, generational trauma, immigrant trauma. And then that allowed me to be more open. You know? And so my first boyfriend, oh, I loved him. We were together for 3 years on and off. Listen, it was toxic. It was not great, but he was hot. The sex was great. She's out here, 21, trying to get her swerve on. That's the hormones overcame the hate of men.
I mean, I feel like if your first relationship isn't toxic, like you were just, I mean, you're just not, I can't relate to you.
You weren't being honest.
You weren't being honest. I'm like, if your first relationship was perfect, like those people that I'm like,
yeah, I don't understand.
Their first boyfriend they marry, I'm like, you could not pay me to be in the same room as some of the guys I dated in high school and in college. Like, no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Did you have a type?
Did I have a type? At first, yes. I had a type that was like, I tended to be attracted to like former athlete, masculine dudes.
So big guys.
Yeah, like 6 feet tall. Yeah, 6 feet tall. Listen, we're not commenting. But in terms of height, like they tended to be like at least 5'10".
Okay.
And former, at least college athletes.
That's good. Did you care about race? Was that a thing?
For a long time, I generally did not want to date white guys because of my politics and just like the sort of probability of feeling like I could relate to them, given who I was, both politically and just life experience.
Right.
And then as I got older, I was like, TikTok, man, I need to open up these fucking probabilities.
You're like, is he breathing? Does he have a pulse?
No,
right?
No. I definitely shifted my standards. But the original standards were, do I want to just climb him and kiss his face, you know? That was the original standards.
And preferably not white. Like preferably a darker complexion man that I could climb and kiss.
Well, yeah. And
well, the irony of it now is your fiancé.
My fiancé is very white, Wisconsin white.
He's Wisconsin.
He's Wisconsin white, but also not like a normal white guy, which is why we get along. But that's a whole other story. But
yeah, well, my husband is very white, but also not a quote unquote normal white guy, even though he's from Boston. So you would think he's like a masshole, but like my parents, who are very, very Chinese, have spent a lot of time with him because we lived with them during the pandemic for 4 months straight up.
Wow.
Imagine being in your mid-30s living with your parents and your then boyfriend, not even fiance. So really could have turned into ex-boyfriend very quickly there. And they're like, Anna, he's more Chinese than we are, like culturally.
That happens a lot.
Yeah. It's not so much and you know, when you said it's not so much about the race, it's just the relatability. I think that's what it is. The older I get, the more I realize how fucking Asian I am when it comes to a lot of like values, when it comes to money, when it comes to family, and just like very small, even something as small as like, please take off your fucking shoes when you come into my house. Like, that's not a white people thing, you know?
I know.
And so, like,
they complain about that sometimes.
I know.
They're like, what?
I know.
No.
I'm like, I have a really aggressive sign on my door now that says, kindly take off your shoes. I really wanted to.
That's not aggressive. That's so sweet. Kindly.
I know.
Come on.
Well, yeah, it's just, I wanted to write something else, but yes.
You better.
I know, right? But okay, so did your parents care who you dated? Because you're the only girl in the family.
We never talked about dating because that's like not a thing we talk about.
Yeah.
The first time I did introduce them to my first boyfriend, who's Latino, I was so nervous. Like I just had all these fears of like what they would say and how they would judge me based off of nothing other than, subliminal messaging from
Right.
childhood, right?
Right.
Nothing explicit.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day I just started crying because I was like, anticipating them meeting him.
Right.
And they're like, why are you crying? We're like playing mahjong. This is like so fucking Chinese. We're playing mahjong and all of a sudden I'm crying, which no emotions have been present in front of my family for years.
Right.
And they're like, why are you crying? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just afraid, my parents are not going to accept me. I was talking to my brother and his wife, and my sister-in-law was like, just go tell your mom. It's fine. I was like, Mom, go. Okay, Mom. I'm just worried that you won't like Bruno. That's his name, Bruno. She's like, what? And she was basically, I was so relieved. She was like, silly girl, why are you crying over this?
Yeah.
Just so long as you're happy. I was like, wait, what?
I know.
Where was this mom growing up? Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. It was
They were
never
so
about my
uptight.
happiness.
No.
It was never about my joy. My joy was last.
No. Exactly. Where is my mom now? This is tremendous. How? And then that's when I really learned. I was like, I was like 21. That was my first time seeing my mom as being someone who could evolve. You know what I mean?
Right.
I was like, oh, wait, you can be different?
Well, it's like what I've heard before, and I always loved, is that our parents are doing life for the first time too.
Yes.
And we forget that.
Yeah.
And especially now that we're of a parental age, even though we don't have children, I realize when I think about how old I was, my mom had me when she was 27. I'm 33. So when she was my age, what's the math on that? I was 5.
Yeah.
That's wild. I mean, but I remember being 5 and being like, this person has all the answers. I mean, I don't even fucking have the answers right now for me. This is probably why I don't have a kid yet. I have a dog, and that's hard enough on its own,
Yeah.
But like, it's just really tough. And especially I think about our parents, they didn't speak the language.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane, to try and navigate life as an adult and be responsible for 3 kids with not speaking the native tongue.
What did they speak?
My parents speak Mandarin and Shanghainese, and they speak English now.
Yeah.
But when they first came, they knew very, very minimal English.
Yeah.
Just enough to kind of get by,
Yeah, I mean, when you ask about like depression and stuff, for me, what I learned was that sometimes maybe it's not chemical, maybe it's not you. Sometimes it's just your circumstances that's messing you up, and we do have a certain amount of agency and choices that we can make.
Mm-hmm.
For some of us, it's getting out of a relationship, it's moving, but sometimes even that's really hard if you don't have the finances, if this other person has some kind of control over you. And so, I just think
it's circumstantial. And I love that because I think there's this tendency to go through really tough times in life and be like, I'm feeling like this because I'm a depressed person or I'm an anxious
to
person.
pathologize
Yes,
it.
exactly.
Right?
And
to be
it's
like,
also,
this is just who I am.
Right. And it's not your personality.
No.
It's just you are going through something really shitty right now that no normal person would react in a normal way to.
Right. No, it's actually normal that you feel depressed because the situation is bonkers.
And you're not a sociopath, which is a good thing.
Right. Because you actually get affected by the things that happen in the world. And so, I don't know. That's why I'm just like, wow, we're 4 years into this pandemic that still kind of exists. And, I just feel like we haven't processed all the grief and all the trauma of that as a collective, as a society, as a culture. And so, these days, if you're a friend, like, don't be a flake, but also I'm more forgiving if you're just like, the weight of the world is on me. I don't feel like going out the house today. It's like, I'm just way more accepting of that post 2020 than I was pre 2020.
Right. Because you've probably felt like that before, like made plans and be like, oh my God, I wish I did not agree to meet this person.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with the other person.
No, it's just where you're at because of just your body decided it needed to process some things.
Right. And you went through something really traumatic during the pandemic. I mean, you lost your father in 2021, late 2021, right?
Yeah.
But it was, so walk me through that because it seems like you knew it was coming. Did he have dementia? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he was slowly you saw him fade away, which I've heard is almost worse.
It's
because you're saying goodbye for like years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when did you realize that when did his dementia set in?
You start seeing early kind of aging characteristics. You don't know if it's dementia when he was like 80 even. My dad was old. I'm just telling you right now. He had me when he was very old. My mom's younger. he's old. So yeah, I've only known my dad as a senior,
Right.
you know?
Right.
So yeah, and so you just kind of start seeing them kind of deteriorate. And at some point you have to like say to yourself, well, what role do I want to have in their life as they've become older? And so that's why I stayed in Los Angeles rather than like being in New York where I probably would be, you know? I went to school on the East Coast, loved being in a big city, but I came back to Los Angeles because I wanted to be closer to my family. And yeah, seeing my dad deteriorate, even though he's the reason I have daddy issues. He's the reason why I had to go through therapy. I still love him, right? I still loved him. And so, yeah, he just, you just I don't know how much you know about dementia, but a lot of times they will just go into loops of scripts where they just want to repeat certain things to you or observe certain things over and over again, and you just live in that loop sometimes. And then toward the end, physically, the frailty, was the month right before he passed away, we made a really tough decision to like put him into an old folks home.
Which is so not Asian.
Yeah, it was
because
very hard for the family because he was becoming violent. He's not he wasn't like a mellowed out old guy, dementia guy. He was like, okay, the worst parts of his personality came out. He was a harm to himself and to us.
So you needed to put him in a home.
I know.
Which is really tough because I've always said, and I said this to my husband when we got married, I was like, you have to understand that short of something like that happening, I'm never putting my parents into a nursing home. They're going to move in with us before I would put them because it's a cultural thing.
Totally.
Whereas it's not an American culture thing. It's more common to be like, oh, it's like natural. They're going to go to a nursing home now. I'm like, no. Yeah. Unless I physically cannot care for my parents because there's some severe disability like with your father there, at the end, it's just not happening. So it's such a tough because it feels like that filial duty you know, that you have to your family. So that's insane. So did you guys have like a family meeting with your brothers and your mom and say, this is what, was anybody opposed to it?
Of course. It was a process. Yeah.
It was a process.
But, we did that and they always say like, try not to remember your loved one as they were in their decline. Try to remember them. But listen, it's hard to forget. I don't know. This is not we don't want to go, I don't want to go into the details, but shit got raw where you're like, damn, we're dealing with just like a human being. You're watching someone die physically. Like their body is shutting down. You know what I mean? Right. So yeah, it was brutal. But that's why I say like during the pandemic, I could not make content. I couldn't talk to a camera to be like, hey guys, what's that? I couldn't.
I know.
I couldn't because I was going through that. I had fallen in love. There was also good things that happened. But when they say like, it's not just bad things that are stressful, it's also like good things. Any change.
Yes.
Listen, you all of a sudden had like 1 million or so eyes on you in the middle of the pandemic.
Yes, and now I'm on antidepressants for the first time in my life.
It's so much, right? Because it's all this energy, all this change. It's like our bodies as human beings, we are not built to evolutionize at the rate of the internet. We aren't.
Well, no, we're not.
We can't adjust. Our brains can't be handling all this information. Our brains can't be handling all of this like eyeballs and fame and like attention and like commentary and like scrutiny and like being observed, Being observed, stressful, so stressful.
It is.
So that's why it's like, I'm sorry you went through your depression. It's great that you're being honest about it because that shit's real. Because everyone could look at you and be like, oh my God, she's so pretty. She has such a nice house. Her hair, her makeup, her clothes, it's so perfect. And she's like an influencer. She like gets all these people to like listen to her. But even these good things can be so tremendously stressful. And so that's what I realized back in the day, right before I quit my first career, is like this therapist who taught me so many things was like, this is a time of change and adjustment. You are not equipped to handle this much change. It could be good change. It could be bad change. But here, go to this group therapy class. You know what I mean? You're going to learn all these things. And I did. I learned all these tremendous things like, meditative breathing to like calm my nervous system. I learned cognitive behavioral therapy. That actually works.
I have tried meditation so many times. I'm like, I can't do it.
But it could just be as simple as breathing and counting.
Okay.
And then like thinking from like your toes to your neck, every part of your body, like try to relax every body in phases. That shit works. Okay. And then when I thought about it, I was like, oh, my mom tried to teach me this stuff when I was a baby.
All right. Like Qigong.
Kind of, but
Sort
like
of almost.
when I was like a child, when I was like 4, I'd be like, I remember sleeping in their bed or something. I was still a baby.
Yeah.
And I would be like, Mom, it's too hot. I can't go to sleep. And then she'll be like, okay, if you just imagine your like your energy being peaceful, it'll become peaceful. Just imagine, like,
Yeah.
so she would be like, I
She's
was like, oh,
teaching.
she was teaching me meditation. I was like, wait,
It's
what's
all
happening?
psychological.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, like doing this group therapy really helped. They taught us so many things.
That's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
also, I think your old therapist deserves a raise. That's like the most like that's the best Yelp review of a therapist I've ever
I've
heard.
searched after her years later. I was like, maybe I need to go back to therapy, And
Yeah.
then I don't think she's in practice, at least for me.
Right.
Yeah.
She's too good. She's like, I need to.
She was half white, half Japanese.
Okay.
And was just so cool and like understanding. She gave me so much.
It's so interesting that she didn't rush to diagnose you as a depressive or an anxious person, which is, I think that's kind of almost not to say that like when people get those diagnoses, it's like their therapists are taking a cop out, but I've never even heard of that. Adjustment
disorder.
Adjustment disorder.
It's just you're just not adjusting to your life phase.
Right. And you were adjusting to a lot. I mean, your
Yeah,
father
and I needed
dying,
more skills.
Yeah. And the fate of humanity, honestly, is really what I was concerned. I was like, this is it. This
Right?
is like
In
the movie.
pandemic.
Yeah.
Oh my God, right?
Yeah.
That's like just that alone. Even if your life is perfect.
Yeah.
Just dealing with like what is going to happen to humanity.
Yeah, I didn't want to look at people. I mean, I fully bought into it. I was like on the street, and this was before nobody knew anything. First of all,
Yeah.
I think it came out recently that 6 feet is bullshit. Like that was just out
Right.
of known. Like I would be on the street in like suburban Pennsylvania in the woods walking with my husband and a dog, and we would see somebody from like literally across the street, like couldn't even tell you that. And I'd be like, don't look at them. They're Medusa. Like I thought it was like literally humanity was. I was like, they're going to give us
Totally.
David's like, you can't, see whether they're a male or a female.
Yeah.
But I was like, they're moving. They might have COVID. So it was really scary. I mean,
Yeah.
And you've talked a lot about kind of your father's death on your Substack and just like in your comedy. And one thing I love that you wrote on your Substack was like things you wish you heard growing up from your parents. And
Yeah.
I think that's so interesting because for those of you who are not Asian parents' love language is not a language. They don't speak it, right? Like and it's a stereotype because it's true. It's like my parents would rather peel me a tangerine than tell me they love me.
It's usually acts of service.
It's acts of
Yeah.
service.
Mhm.
And so I never really, and like now we say I love you to one another, but it still feels kind of foreign. Hugs feel foreign, I mean, I married an American family where they hug a lot. And like now it's like, it's funny watching like my mom try and hug my husband and she's just like, nobody knows what to do with their arms and everything. But I'm curious, like, do you wish you said anything to your dad while he was here? Because you guys, you didn't talk about your
No.
feelings. You said everything.
Oh, yeah. A lot of my growth was also just confronting him to be like, I didn't like how you treated Mom. Like I said all the things.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. That was a big part of my healing.
Interesting. And this was before his decline in his 80s?
Yeah, that where he was still like
Right, because I think it's a little unfair to be like, you're dying and you can't process at all what I'm saying, so I'm going to finally get it all out.
No,
he
I
was
think-
still comprehending what you were saying.
Yeah, a lot of when he was, kind of hurting and kind of deep in his dementia, it was a lot of just comforting him.
Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't a conversation. It was just
No,
palliative
no,
care.
no. Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I'm happy to say that I don't have regrets about not having said things to my dad, I tell my
awesome.
mom everything now.
Right.
Basically everything. How much I love her. I've trained her into hugging me. That was a whole thing I did.
Yeah.
I actively trained her.
Do you think she enjoys it now?
I think so. She
Okay.
probably still thinks it's like, that's the sound Chinese people
that
make
is that.
when they're just like, what is this? This is nonsense,
I know.
It's very like that. But no, but she likes it. She's embraced it. And like, Corey, my fiance, loves hugging her too because he's a lover and a hugger. And then she lets him, like we've all hung out a lot. So now she's like very comfortable with him. So, I'm so fortunate that I've been able to kind of do the things now and have the sort of budget to be able to treat my mom like the queen she is.
That is the best
She never
feeling
got
in the
treated.
world. Oh, yeah.
She never got treated. I'm like, I took her to British tea, afternoon tea in London.
High tea in
High
London?
tea at a fancy London hotel. So much silverware.
I know.
So much tableside service. My mom's like, oh, this is so much cleaning. Every little,
many forks.
So many forks.
She's like, where are the chopsticks?
My dad used to make fun of like Western dinner service because he's like, why? Why would you make a tool for just one thing? Chopsticks, Chinese chopsticks, so smart, so genius. Chopsticks, spear, skewer, cut. Used together to pick things up. You could do so many things. It's multi-use.
If you pick up the bowl, you can use it as a shovel to shovel it into your mouth.
My dad never understood exactly. My dad never understood the wisdom of Western cutlery.
Although he wasn't wrong, I will say he wasn't wrong. It's less wasteful. But yes, it is. And the whole table side, I never went to like cotillion or etiquette school or whatever. And so I kind of got a crash course on like the way I still don't know how to set a fucking table, to be honest. But I know when I've been wrong, people have fixed it. Like, oh, the fork's not on the right side.
Right.
Well, you know what? I'm right-handed.
Yeah.
And I remember setting a table, be like, well, I pick up the fork with my right hand, so I'm going to put the fork and the spoon and
There's
everything.
There's no rhyme or reason to.
But it goes on the fucking left.
No.
It goes on the. I was like, wait, why?
Care.
And then you have to pick it up with your left hand, and then. But that's how you do it. That's how you set a table. And I was like, this. I don't understand because I didn't learn that growing up. My God, my parents were lucky. They fucking had forks. You know.
I love that that you grew up outside of Philadelphia because it explains to me why you sound like a mainline person. You sound like a fancy, old money mainline lady when you're actually Chinese Shanghainese.
But I'm so Shanghainese and I'm so Chinese and I've just gotten like really Asian as I've gotten old. I used to, I think most kids who grow up, because you grew up in Southern California and there's a lot of Asians and there's a lot of diversity here. And this is what because I went to NYU after high school.
Yeah.
And all my friends from NYU are Asian. So they're either from LA, SF, or they're from Long Island.
Yeah.
And they're all Korean or Chinese.
Love a Long Island Asian.
Yes. The Long Island Koreans represent.
I know.
I'm like, yeah, but different than the LA Koreans.
Very different.
Very different.
Yeah.
But I did not realize what it felt like to be around people that look like me until I was 18 or 19 or 20. And people always say now, even when I meet, when I meet LA Asians, they're like, you sound so white. And I'm like, yeah, because if you looked at my fucking high school, you would know, because I grew up in the suburbs outside of Philly.
Would you call that suburb mainline?
I grew up in a town called Malvern, and it's like, I think it's the main line, but it's like
it wasn't
cuspy.
Like blue. It's not blue. Like
it's
blue collar.
not blue collar, but it's not like Villanova main line.
Just for those who don't know, mainline, breed is sort of what they call this sort of set of suburbs just west of Philadelphia, where like really old money, fancy white people, waspy.
Yes.
White people lived. And so I would never say to an Asian, you sound white, but I definitely will say, oh, you sound like a mainliner.
Right. I like, it's funny.
You sound like old money.
I sound like old money, but I have, oh my God, there was no money when I was a kid. Because here's the thing, there's this, I didn't always live in Malvern. I lived in Devon, which is definitely the main line for 8 years.
Ooh,
but when I was living in Devon, we lived in this massive apartment complex full of immigrant kids because it was the only,
the one apartment complex.
Right. It was a huge apartment complex of multiple buildings. And it was the best upbringing up until I went to elementary school because it was like the freaking UN. Yeah. I mean, there were kids from all walks of life. There was like a Russian kid, a Portuguese kid. Everybody
love
was
an ethnic white.
Right? And
I love an ethnic white.
An Indian kid. You know, because these were all kids whose parents were immigrants who wanted them to get a good education because the public schools in that area were really good, but they couldn't afford to buy a house in Devon. So we lived in an apartment forever. I was 12 before my parents even bought a house. And even then it wasn't a single family home. Yeah. And so it's like people are like, oh, you're from the main line. I'm like, not like that. You know, my parents did not buy their first single family home until after I graduated college. I was 23 when they moved into a house with like a garage and a yard. And I was like, wow, we have made it.
Yeah.
You know?
May I ask what they did for a living?
My parents are both scientists, which I did not get that gene. I know. It's so bizarre.
What kind of science?
Chemistry and computer science.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Didn't get that at all. Hated chem. don't like technology or comp sci.
And do they learn their chemistry or their science here in America?
Yes. Partially, they both went to college in China, in Shanghai.
Yeah.
And then they came here because my dad got into grad school in Michigan, not University of Michigan, which everyone knows. He got into Eastern Michigan University,
Why
which
you
is
laugh?
a small school because people have never, outside of Michigan, people have never heard of it. They called it EMU. And he was like, oh, my passion was physics in high school, which I was like, interesting way of putting it, because I would not put that in my, like, I would never say science was a passion of mine. But he's like, I couldn't make a living doing physics, so I studied chemistry.
Yeah.
And so that's what he did forever. Wow. Yeah. So, and then that's why we ended up outside of Philly, because there's a lot of biotech out there. And so it's just sort of like, it's an interesting thing. Whereas if you're not Asian American, you probably look at you and I and you're like, oh, they don't sound different. But there's like, I feel like Asians, they can tell. Like Asian Americans are like, you're not from LA, or you're not from SF. I'm like, yeah. So it's interesting. Like I never, and maybe that's why, like, I feel like I have more of a chip on my shoulder than like Asians from California, because it's not, I'm sure you struggle. I mean, fucking Burton telling you that your nose was too big, and you got him in the end, because you were like, I'm in a fucking Netflix show. But it's like, I think I've always been struggling to accept my identity. And I think in this way, it has come out in a very angry way, because I never felt like I belonged or I had a right to exist.
Yeah.
Whereas like my girlfriends from SF, like I lived with the same girl who's Taiwanese for 6 years in college. She like doesn't need to tell people like she's Asian and accept. She's like, I'm Asian. Like, who cares?
No, I feel like your experience is actually very normal. It's a normal reaction to being raised in a mostly white environment, and then later realizing like, wait, I can like be comfortable being myself around people who are more like me.
Right.
Or whatever combination of things,
it's kind
existential
of being
things.
Around people that like you don't have to explain yourself to.
Yes.
Which is it's very similar to what we were talking about earlier. It's like you wanted to date somebody that maybe wasn't white, so you wouldn't have to do so much explaining.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but then you grew up in a pretty diverse place. Where in Southern California did you grow up, by the way?
Torrance.
Okay.
Torrance, a very big suburb.
All right.
Grew up around a lot of different Asian immigrant kids, Latinx kids, Black, Pacific Islander. Yeah.
Yeah. But then you were like, I'm going to go to the whitest place on earth. You went to Swarthmore for college,
Swarthmore.
which is a really great school. But why?
Yeah.
Like, I'd never hear of kids from California being like, I'm going to go to Swarthmore.
Yeah, I had a really good guidance counselor who said, your parents don't make money. So did you know that you could probably pay less for college if you went to like a fancy, like private institution that had money? More than say like UCLA. I had like a small scholarship to UCLA, paid less going to Swarthmore because they were more need blind because they're rich. They have like a huge endowment. And they have a lot of times they have these equity policies that try to like make sure that, kids who don't come from a lot of
underprivileged backgrounds.
Yeah. So, by the time I was ready to go to college, my mom was a garment worker and my dad was retired and they were living off of like, Social Security. So I was like, okay, well, this is my finances. And I was able to like pay not much just to go to a really big fancy school where I like got to live on campus. And at the time, they also recruited very actively to make sure that a lot of students of color came. So, my class was one of the bigger students of color classes at Swarthmore, which made it fun. And it was a lot of like kids from New York. I was like, wow, New York is amazing. Look at all these kids from New York. I want to live there.
I mean, that's so interesting because it's like I would never think of Swarthmore as being a diverse place, but it sounds like they did a really good job.
But they did relative to the other small liberal arts colleges.
Right.
Yeah. But no, I mean, my guidance counselor said, look it up. There's these different types of colleges. And I did. And so,
Did you love it when you got there? I mean,
no,
that's such a
I didn't.
huge
I didn't.
culture
It was
shock.
really hard. It was very hard. I grew a lot. Going to a small liberal arts college like Swarthmore, going to the East Coast, you're going to school with kids who are children of Harvard professors. And, it's a really great way to culturally learn how to, mix it up with elite people, elite East Coast people. That's a great way. Go work for NPR. Oh, What a good stepping stone. Go to Swarthmore College,
Right.
or become a professor. A lot of kids became academics at Swarthmore. We're very academic-y focused kind of school. But, and that was exciting, intellectually exciting. Socially, we had a lot of, I was more extroverted than most of the kids there. And all the extroverted students of color got together and we had fun. But it was very stressful. We all took ourselves very seriously as students. Like, it was hardcore. So I wouldn't say Swarthmore was fun, but I grew a lot, and wouldn't do it again. But I got to have a lot of time to like sit there and like really think about the world, which is amazing. And also, be a student activist. So I was able to learn about myself through that.
Well, I imagine it was a good place to kind of test the waters there because
Exactly.
it's a very kind of open, liberal.
Low stakes.
Place. Yeah,
low stakes. It's not like real life. You get to like launch campaigns. You get to do things,
And not get chairs thrown at you.
Hopefully not. Have, intellectual conversations, a lot of resources, eat a lot of brie. I don't know. Small liberal arts, private liberal arts colleges love a teacher who serves charcuterie.
But
they love serving
never
charcuterie.
knew what brie was until I was maybe 22 or something.
After NYU?
Yeah. I mean, who was eating brie in college? That's just expensive.
Yeah, that's Swarthmore College.
We
gotta
bought
go to
cheese.
a fancy liberal arts college.
My husband turned 40 last weekend, and we threw a party, and we bought all this fancy cheese. And cheese is
so expensive.
So expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like kind of lactose because a lot of Asians are.
Yeah.
Like, I can eat it, but I don't feel good after. And I really should not be in a public place, or at least a public place without like a private bathroom after.
Yeah.
But yeah, cheese is expensive. And all these little things you don't realize as a kid growing up not around privilege.
Yeah.
That these are things like I never knew how to ski growing up. And like a lot of people I knew just grew up going skiing. And they're just good at skiing now. And I just decided, I was like, I'm just not going to ski. Like, it's not my thing,
I learned how to snowboard.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, in my 20s.
Are you good at it?
I'm okay.
Do you like it?
I love it.
Okay, see, that's
but
the
I have
thing.
to be on the bunny slopes. But the thing with Southern California, as like an Asian American in Southern California, there were like slightly fancier Asians that like did go skiing and like snowboarding. Yeah, because it's Southern California.
Well, my parents took me to skiing once because they wanted me to have the experience, but I don't think they understood that like that was not how you teach your kid to ski. They were like, oh, it seems like other parents are doing this, so they like saved up to take me skiing once to like a really shit mountain in Pennsylvania, and that was my only experience. But yeah,
it's just
Southern
called
California.
Shit Mountain. We went to Shit Mountain, Pennsylvania.
Shit Mountain, Pennsylvania. Yeah, it was an interesting experience for sure. So I want to shift gears a little because you got engaged last year.
I did.
And you had
2 years now.
Oh, was it 2 years now?
Yeah, I know.
Wait, is it? Okay, because oh my God. Okay, so
time flies.
Time flies. Well, you're still engaged at least.
Yes.
I didn't miss the wedding.
No.
And I loved your bit on being engaged and how you just feel like you're better now that you're
all of a
engaged.
sudden I'm just like, oh, I feel superior. I didn't grow up thinking I'd be that kind of girl to be like, oh my God,
Well, you didn't grow up liking men, it sounds like, for a long time.
Why? Why would I like them?
I know. Straight men are the bear or the man, the bear, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, choose the bear. How did you meet Corey?
I met Corey through a dating app that if you want to hit me up and sponsor us, I'll tell you what it is. But yeah, we met in May of 2020.
Oh my God.
Thick in the pandemic. He had gotten original COVID in like late March, April. We were just like, I was just like, I got nothing better to do. I'm going to keep swiping. Right. And we just started chatting and we didn't meet. From May until the beginning of July, we didn't meet in person until then.
But you were you texting? Were you on the phone
We were texting,
calling?
and then we did phone calls, and then we did like Zoom dates.
Right.
I know.
And then you just realized there was like a really good chemistry there?
Yeah, I think at a certain point, you just kind of go, oh, I know what I want, and you just kind of talk about it. Like, my idea of a happy life is XYZ. And then this other person goes, oh my God, me too. And
what
then
is your idea of a happy life?
I mean, one of the things that we talked about was for a while I was dating a bunch of introverts, and I love introverts. But I think what I realized was dating Corey, who's even more of an extrovert than me, is like, oh, wait a minute, this feels different. Like, Oh, you too have a vision of like we would love to have our home be somewhere that our friends feel
You
comfortable
just had a pizza
dropping in.
party.
Exactly. I would love a pizza oven.
Right.
We would love a big dining table to be able to like bring our friends together. They feel comfortable coming over. We'll make them food and drink. Like immediately we both vibed on that, you know?
Right.
And
Which
now we
is,
live that. I have
yeah.
a pizza party regularly in my
Your
backyard.
backyard is gorgeous. I mean, it's like,
Oh, thank you.
it feels like very all the Southern California vibes.
Yes.
But now you get to like, because that is tough. If you're an extrovert and they say opposites attract, right? If you're an extrovert, like marrying or dating an introvert and you want to have the big party and all they want to do is like disassociate from society.
Totally. Yeah.
That's so
hard.
tough. And you were doing that for a while.
Yes, I was dating people that just probably weren't compatible with me. But, you know, in my head at the time, I was like, I can make this work.
Of course. You're a
I'm a fixer.
Yeah.
I can fix this.
I'll turn them into the perfect man for me. Was there one relationship? Okay, so between the abusive guy when you were 21 that you first dated.
It wasn't abusive. It was
Right.
more, I barely knew who I was.
Okay.
So I didn't know even to like ask for what I wanted.
Okay. So before
Yeah.
the dysfunctional relationship,
Yes.
let me rephrase that. And Corey, did you date somebody seriously in that time?
Many times.
Many times.
Oh, yeah.
So you had lots of relationships that could have
did.
turned into.
None of them would have turned into a true commitment because I think I was probably afraid of commitment. I didn't know what worked for me. I didn't know how to advocate for myself or even, I mean, and I've heard you talk about this too, just realizing like, oh, right, the sorting process happens immediately. Like you can't just get, you're spending all this time trying to be in a relationship, trying to like make it work when sometimes it's just better to just judge very quickly
Yes.
and either deciding to go forward or not, you know?
Right.
And so
Well, I think
just
if
got
you
better
have to think about it too much, it's probably no.
yeah,
You know.
I agree. But I think I was just so naive. We just
Aren't we
to
all?
just like fall into things because you're like, ooh, feelings, you know, ooh,
Right.
attention or whatever is motivating you at the time.
Yeah.
I would just sort of convince myself that like, oh, this might be promising, you know?
Well, also, if you're in such a stressful job,
Yeah.
I think the thing is you want an escape from that life
100%.
after work. And you're like, I just want somebody to like hold me or love me and not be
Yes.
yelling at me and just, you
Yes.
know, and so that's, I think, the huge trap like women fall into is, and I see this dichotomy a lot. I have girlfriends who are crushing it in their office jobs and have
Yeah,
no
yeah.
problem writing curt emails and not writing, you know, but then they allow these absolute trash behaviors from men into their lives.
Yes.
And they'll let a guy walk out and come back and walk out and come back. I'm like,
Yes.
you would never allow this to happen in your corporate life.
100%.
Why are you doing it now? And
Yeah.
so it sounds like you were like, I'm going to crush some balls or whatever in my job, but like in real life, I'm going to let them walk all over me.
I don't know about walk all over me, but I definitely didn't advocate for myself.
For
It's just yeah, for sure. I didn't have standards. Let's be honest.
My standard used to be whoever wanted me. Honestly, that was
Same.
literally my standard. I'm
Same.
like, I just want to be wanted and I'll make it
100.
work.
Yes.
You know?
100. I know it sounds so sad.
I know it's
saying it out loud.
I used to think it wasn't necessary for me to even be attracted to them. Like, I'm not even kidding you.
Yeah.
The bar was in hell.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I feel like a lot of women relate. I mean, I did that, you know, and there would still be good qualities about them. It's not like they were like all trash.
Right.
But in terms of who they were in relation to me, definitely didn't have standards. I just sort of went with the flow. Does that make sense? I
Oh,
would just
yeah.
kind of accept what they gave me.
Do you have a
until I stopped. And then I started to like actually like, oh, take control of like the rhythm of something or be like, no, this isn't gonna work, you know?
Yeah. Do you have a favorite ex? And I know that's a weird question, but
Favorite ex?
like I think about like there's a couple pivotal men in my life where I'm like, if you had not come into my life and fucked it up, I would not have the life I have today. And I love my life today. But
Yeah. I learned from every single ex for sure. But I would say a very pivotal ex was this guy that triggered all of my daddy issues. He was Korean. He triggered all of my daddy issues. He was much older than me. And yeah, like once I felt that triggering, I was like, wait a minute, whoa. I need to step back. I like bought myself some books. a book, Why Does He Do That? It was all about the anatomy of
This
a
is why
male
it's called
abuser.
Self-Help Me.
Yes,
your
my
show.
monthly show is called Self-Help Me because I love self-care books. But yeah, Why Does He Do That? Highly recommend reading that book when you're thinking about like how does like an abusive man work. I bought that book. I bought these other books like Loving Him Without Losing You. Incredible book. Those were like my like foundation for like, oh, this is how I should operate. Anyway, I read these books and I was like, oh wait, why does he do that? Why does this guy 100% follow this pattern to a T? Oh, why does this also sound like my dad? Because of that relationship, I ended it. Felt very empowered ending it. Then I decided that's when I would confront my dad and be like, Dad, why do you treat mom a certain way? I straight up did that. And it was like so scary at first to think about it, but I did it. And that book helped me to see how my dad would react. Textbook, you know?
Interesting.
Yeah. When you corner a scared animal or a frightened animal, they'll react a certain predictable way.
Do you feel like you got closer to your dad after that conversation?
No, I felt like I had more power over him though,
Okay.
you know?
Yeah.
Because he became more afraid of me.
Right.
Yeah.
And I bet he
It's
never
messed
saw that
up.
coming.
I know. It's
Yeah.
messed up to say it that way, but I think, you know, my dad, he gave me so much. He gave me this fire. He gave me, you know, my, you know, take no prisoners personality. Yeah. And he encouraged my like talents and my intellect. But he also, you know, gave me these things I had to work on, which is to be able to confront he was the big boss, you know, at the end of the video game phase or whatever, there's the big boss and he was the big boss. And that confrontation was my big boss. It was like, okay, after I confront you, why would I be afraid of any man? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, that is amazing.
And so I felt very empowered after that to be like, oh, actually, I can take control of the rhythm and the shape of a relationship in my dating. Like that was very empowering.
And I think it's so important to acknowledge that even though you love your dad and loved everything that he gave you, he was not a perfect person, because I think there's this like tendency to want to put your parents on a pedestal.
100%. And this is like, I feel like that's a part of growing up. That's a part of maturing as a person, because then you can see who you are for all your faults and your, you know, positive things. And you can do that with someone else, right?
Right.
In a relationship.
Like they don't have to be your superhero in order for you to love them.
100%.
And I think it comes through so much in your content that you very much love your parents. You love your dad. You love your mom. And I want to end on this story, and I'm going to have you tell it because I'm going to butcher it. But you wrote in your Substack about how you were paying your respects to the wrong grave. And I just thought, I was like, this is so metaphorical of your life, because it's a sad moment. It's the first time you were visiting your dad's grave.
After the funeral.
After the funeral.
Yeah.
And you did it, you confessed all your feelings to the wrong grave. And Corey, your fiance, this is why he's your fiance, found the right one for you. But yeah, why don't you tell the story?
I mean, that's basically it.
Yeah.
It was the first time I went back to my dad's grave after the funeral. And I was like, well, you know, let me just like say what I want to say to my dad when I'm at his grave. So we're just like, the marker hadn't been put in. I don't know if you've ever been to a funeral, but like, you know, when someone is freshly dead, their plaque takes a while for it to like show up. So you kind of have to rely on these weird little numbers.
Well, also it's COVID, so supply chain delays hit
tombstones 100%, 100%. And so I was like guesstimating where my dad was. And so I just like picked a plot and sat down and was just like, yeah, Dad, you know, miss you so much, blah, blah, blah. I'm like crying, you know, like Chinese people, they love tears of a sad filial daughter because, you know, that means that you truly love them. That's a whole thing. And then
they hire professional criers.
They
at
do.
Funerals.
That's how serious the crying is.
Yeah.
And so I was doing all that, pouring my heart out. And then Corey was like, hey, babe, I think this is your dad. I'm like, oops. Sorry. Hope you have a good life. Afterlife. Okay, bye. Whoever you are.
And then you did
it was so funny. And then I just like, and I had to redo it. Dad, I miss you so much.
Did you redo the whole thing?
A little bit. I mean, Corey was like, your dad heard that. You know, It'll be fine.
He's not, you know, he's physically in there, but
You're
his spirit heard that. And you know what? Maybe that happened. Maybe that happened because that guy needed a little bit of love. Or maybe, maybe him or her, we don't know. We don't know. Did you ever find out who that was? Him or her? Maybe they did not have a family member crying to them.
Missing them.
Yeah. So maybe that happened because I like to think that. I like to think there's, I like to find meaning in everything, whether or not it's actually there.
I got love to go around.
I know.
Right. Even for the afterlife people.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh,
This was
Anna,
such an
what a
awesome
treat.
conversation.
Isn't it fun when you're like, oh my God, I like follow them online and then now they're like here in
It
real
is-
life. It's like you just jumped off the phone.
It is wild. I was telling my husband about interviewing you. I was like, I can't believe Jenny said yes. I get to meet her because like
Oh my
I also
gosh.
wasn't sure. Like it's like she's a comedian. She's touring sometimes. I was like, I didn't know
Yeah.
where in the world you were. I was like,
I'm
I'm gonna
around.
just DM her and see, and we'll just go from there.
Yeah.
And so I'm really happy we could make it work while I was here. So thank you so much.
Thank you for being you.